So in this video, we're going to look at some good news because we're going to look back over the last few months, the last year or so, and just look at some of Ukraine's biggest successes. And it's helpful to do that periodically, but it's particularly helpful right now. I'm just feeling particularly at a low point. And while I don't do the war combat, like people blowing up kind of reporting, I spend a lot of time looking at things like just this cartoon alone is depressing enough. 11 people were handed military draft notices right as they received Russian citizenship at their naturalization ceremony in St. Petersburg. Imagine that. I'm naturalized, and oh, I got to go to the front line in Ukraine. I mean, imagine what that would be like. And this kind of, ugh, it just adds up over time, and it takes a toll on mental health. It was to the point I was reading about, how to guard against this sort of thing, because there's a cumulative effect of this vicarious trauma. And so while what I experience is something less than what somebody else who's trying to show you war footage experiences, I still like just the lies, the propaganda, the terrible, like, how can you say that kind of thing? It just adds up over time. So this is the reason that and so this is Bellingcat talking about how, maybe you want to think twice about watching that video. Do you need to watch it? Maybe you should, just kind of put the sound off and scroll through to see if it's something that you need to see, or if it's something that, right? It's why I wouldn't show you the guy that dropped the grenade in the city council, because I can't unsee that. And I don't want to link that below to have you see that either, because it's unnecessary. It's just destructive. There's nothing redemptive that comes out of actually seeing that. Okay, so but I did see this video and I thought, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. It's at a time where Ukraine doesn't seem to be making progress. It helps to actually go back and look at the progress that they have made in order to see the trajectory of where they're going. So let's look at this video. This was from the Kyiv Post. I'm going to watch most of the video with you, and they just did a great job of this. These are the 5 best special ops in
Hi,
2023.
I'm Stefan Korshak, the Kyiv Post defense correspondent. And as part of our end-of-the-year coverage, I'd like to recap some of the major Ukrainian behind-the-lines attacks this year. The bottom line is they really picked up. If, during 2023, the fighting line in the Russo-Ukraine war stayed pretty much stagnant behind Russian lines, Ukrainian special operators played havoc.
And the lines were largely static. There were a few points where they broke through a little bit, got through the first or second defense line, or they're bottling up the Russians like Advika. But generally speaking, they didn't really get through the lines like they were hoping they would get through the lines.
Again and again.
So let's look at where they really did well.
On May 13, Russian aircraft flying over Russia's western Bryansk region started blowing up. Supposedly, that was safe airspace. It was about 70 kilometers from the Ukrainian border and more than 100 kilometers from anywhere the Ukrainians could set up an air defense system. The only possible weapon that could be responsible, it seemed, was an American Patriot missile system. Ukraine had received its first battery, and that was set up around Kiev. And that was too far from Russia to attack the aircraft in Russian skies.
So this had the Russians scratching their head. How could this possibly be? Well, it's clever. You'll find out.
A second system from Germany arrived in April. Everyone thought Ukraine's second Patriot system was too valuable to risk parking anywhere near Russia. According to later reports, operators for the second Patriot system moved at night in disguised vehicles. They set their equipment up within a few kilometers of Russia, and then they turned on their radars. In less than an hour, 5 Russian aircraft were knocked down.
You remember that?
One was a valuable Su-24 tactical bomber. One was a top-end Su-34 fighter jet. And 2 were helicopters crammed with electronic gear designed to find enemy radars. The last shoot-down was a rescue helicopter sent to search for pilots that bailed out. There were 0 Ukrainian losses.
Yeah, I remember reporting on that and going, wow, what is going on here? How did they do that? Well, now we know.
Where that Patriot battery is now is a Ukrainian military secret. In late August and early September, the Ukrainians made good on a threat that they would retaliate against Russian bombers launching missiles at Ukrainian towns and cities. Up until that point, the Russian bombers had been able to make attacks with impunity since they were based deep in Russia. On August 19th, images appeared of one Russian Tu-22 strategic bomber, a missile carrier, burning on an airfield called Soltse, some 700 kilometers inside of Russia. At least one other bomber was damaged. The Kremlin kept silent, while the Russian internet said maybe it was kamikaze drones. Then, on August 21st, at least 12 Ukrainian drones hit a military airfield near the city of Kursk. This was 600 kilometers inside of Russia.
Yep.
At least 5 military aircraft were hit. Official Ukrainian sources later announced they used a newly developed drone called a Mergin, which is about the size of a motorcycle, and they used it to evade the air base's defenses and hit the aircraft. Also, 2 Russian anti-drone batteries were blown up. The Ukrainian internet later reported the Ukrainians launched a swarm of little Australian cardboard drones.
Do you remember these, the cardboard drones? Those were awesome because like they have such a different footprint with the radar, and yeah, it was pretty remarkable. The Ukrainians have been so clever about this.
To spoof the Russian radars. But there was no official confirmation about that. About a week later, according to satellite photos, the airfield was evacuated.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, like so far into Russia, they were able to have this effect. And the fascinating thing about that is that when Russia is silent about a thing, when you know something has gone boom, and then they're quiet about it, they don't know how to respond, you know something has gone down.
Right after that, in late August, in the Russia-occupied Black Sea Peninsula at Crimea, some Ukrainian commandos landed and blew up a Russian early warning radar and some elements of Russia's best anti-aircraft system, an anti-missile missile called the S-400.
Those are the really expensive ones, the S-400. Like that's top of the line. That's their best kind of air defense.
The Kremlin said it was a pinprick. Then, on September 13, the Ukrainians launched around 10 British Storm Shadow cruise missiles that are designed to destroy ships at Russia's Black Sea Fleet home base in the Crimean port of Sevastopol. Under normal circumstances, the Russian early warning radar and the S-400 should have intercepted the Ukrainian Storm Shadow missiles, but they had been blown up by the commandos. So, the Storm Shadow missiles blew up a Russian Navy big amphibious landing ship, a missile submarine, and even better for the Ukrainians, the smashed ships and other strikes left all 3 military dry docks in Sevastopol port ruined. That meant that the Russian Navy had no place to repair not just the ships that had already been hit, but ones that might get hit in the future.
I remember that. I was at a football game watching and like scrolling through the news. There was a little pause and going, whoa, this is important. And then for the next couple of days, we couldn't actually find out exactly what happened, but we knew that something was hit. And the Russian sources were like, there's nothing to see here. And then it turns out, yeah, there's, Suchomimus and others were showing just what the damage was.
The Kremlin said almost all the missiles were shot down and that the damage was minor and that it would be quickly repaired 3 days after.
Sometimes when they talk about being shot down, it means that they were hit with the target. It's like, why do you keep hitting my fist with your face? Like, you got to stop doing that. You're going to hurt your face.
That 2 more Storm Shadow missiles plowed into Black Sea Fleet headquarters during a senior staff meeting. Reports are conflicting, but it appears that dozens of Russian naval commanders were killed or injured, including the vice boss of the entire fleet.
Okay, and that guy was the guy that they were trying to put onto the screen later on and say, yeah, so he's propped up against pillows. See, he's still with us. When he didn't talk, he didn't move, he didn't blink. And we still don't know what happened to him, but our guess is that he is no longer with us.
The Russians accused the Ukrainians of targeting civilians and said everything was fine. But by the beginning of October, except for small boats and patrol cutters, the Russian fleet had evacuated Sevastopol. The last time they did that was when the Germans invaded in 1941.
Okay, now I want to pause here for a moment and I want to go back to one of my videos because I was talking about in this video, I was talking about the third counteroffensive strategy, okay? Because what actually happened was the counteroffensive wasn't getting the traction that it otherwise should have or could have, and so here I'm talking about what happened to a third strategy. And I think this third strategy is useful, but remember, it's not like we're going to do this and now we're going to do that and now we're going to do this other thing. It's not like that. It's stacking one on top of the other on top of the other. So they're still trying to get through in the on the minefields and through trenches and things like that. On top of that, they've also shifted gears and tried to add, trying to destroy the logistics hubs and other things. And on top of that, they're applying this strategy. And this strategy, I think, is reasonably effective. So this third strategy is harassment in various places. So they're creating visible, and visible is important because they're getting these wins. They're getting this, some information war value out of this. Visible, and it creates dilemmas for the Russians. Yesterday I talked about... Okay, now, when was that? This was 4 months ago when I was talking about this. This is the kind of thing that he's talking about here. They're creating all these problems in Russia, deep into Russia, in the Black Sea, right? And they've actually had quite a good year in this regard.
More than a year, the Ukrainians have been begging Washington for ATACMS missiles, which are a medium-range weapon that carries a big warhead throwing explosive bomblets over an area the size of several football fields. Americans had refused for a long time. According to the White House, if America gave Ukraine medium-range missiles, Russia might do something aggressive. In October, the Americans announced they were thinking about changing their minds, and on October 17th, something between 4 and 18 ATACMS missiles hit Russian airfields near the occupied cities of Berdyansk and Luhansk. To say the Russian military wasn't expecting the strikes is an understatement. At minimum, 9 Russian attack or transport helicopters were cut to pieces by the bomblets. Also destroyed were, at least, 2 anti-aircraft systems stationed at the airfields to protect the airfields from missile attacks. Accounts vary, but likely between 10 and 20 more Russian aircraft were damaged.
How about that?
It was very probably the worst single day of Russian Air Force losses since World War II. The Americans reportedly only gave the Ukrainians 10 to 20 ATACMS total. So for now, other Russian air bases are relatively safe, it looks like. On November 30th, during the night, in a remote Russian Siberian region called Buryatia, a train carrying diesel fuel and aviation gas drove into a mountain tunnel. And then, at least 5 train cars blew up and there was a huge fire. Ukrainian special services took credit. The strike shut down traffic along the main railroad used by Russia to import goods from its friends in China, which provides dual-use goods, and North Korea, which is right now Russia's best source of artillery ammunition. Fixing the rail break was complicated because the tunnel is in a mostly roadless region. It goes under, is on a fault line, and so water leaks are continuous. Also, this is Siberia, so repair crews are facing temperatures of 20 degrees below and worse. The Kremlin said it was a minor problem and that traffic would keep moving because, fortunately, there was a bypass line around the tunnel that takes trains through a mountain pass. Ukrainian saboteurs blew up a bridge leading to the pass the next day. Thanks for watching.
So this was a great review because it helped us understand, like, at least every other month or so, there was a huge incident here that had some significant damage. When you can blow up a number of airplanes and helicopters and force them back, when you can hit a ship and force the Navy back, when you can hit a tunnel and create such havoc that they lose their main line of transporting goods in for military goods, that's pretty significant. So there's a narrative going around like, well, Ukraine can't win. Ukraine's, losing their support. Ukraine is on the ropes, or, and for his part, Putin has taken victory laps in what he's saying. So just wanted to remind you of the good things that are happening, because you need to keep everything in perspective. Okay, that's all that I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.